Hey, you beautiful twin flames, and welcome back to Tarot for You 444. This is an audio recording, and I'm making an audio recording because I really want you to listen to the words that are being said. And for many of you who take notes, or have a diary, you can write some of this stuff down, and it's really going to help you in your twin flame journey, I feel. So this particular concept video is made around twin flames who are in separation and twin flames who are, in, I guess you could call it semi-union, where you're, going back and forth, talking to one another, and then they might leave, or you might leave, or, that kind of thing. We often talk about the 5D aspect, or the ethereal realm, that feeling of your twin flame. But what do you do when you come into this, actual in reality version of your twin flame? You finally brought them in, they finally come, they may come and go, and then you're trying to explain things to them, or you're wondering why they're behaving a certain way. It can kind of get a bit batshit crazy, as I like to say. And I want to kind of go through a few things. It's actually, I believe it's called an acronym, where you use the first letter of each word. So I'm going to call it R.E.A.L. So this is the R.E.A.L acronym for what kind of goes on in the 3D reality of the twin flame journey. So even if you're in separation right now and you haven't heard from your twin flame for years or months or weeks or days or whatever it is, I'm guessing that this is kind of what happened before you separated, and also kind of some of the reasons why this is going to be helpful to you. All right, so if we can remember the word R.E.A.L, if you're taking notes, you can write this down. R.E.A.L stands for request as the R, explain as the E, ask as the A, and leave as the L. Okay, so that makes the acronym R.E.A.L. So what usually happens after the bubble love phase is that, shit kind of gets real, if we want to put it in really plain terms. And Little Red Riding here is here with me laughing that shit just gets real, because she knows all about that because of, her situation with Grandma and the wolf and all of that stuff. So requesting is usually what the divine feminine does. Sometimes the masculine will do it too, but they'll be requesting of something. So let's just say you've gone through the bubble love phase, everything's feeling kind of great, and then you might come back together and realize, after being apart for a minute, you might realize that for this to work in the 3D reality, in the actual 3D world, not in meditation or prayer kind of feeling or ethereal realm, but for this to actually work in the 3D, you might have a few requests of the other person, which kind of, some people would go, yeah, but hang on a minute, this journey is supposed to be unconditionally loving. How can you request something? Well, if we go into understanding the needs, and I believe it's Maslow who dictates this theory about needs, we need shelter, and we need air, and we need food, and we need love. You can look up Maslow, about what human needs are. So you might come to understand that your twin flame might have been doing something in the past which makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable. So let's say you have abandonment issues as an example. You may say to your twin flame, I'd really like it if we could connect more often. Let's say, I don't know, on a Monday, or I don't know, if you're more keen, you know, it might be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because I feel safe and secure when we do that. So maybe that's a request that you've given. Another example of a request might be that, you know, your twin flame may not tell you everything that you want to know about them. So you might ask them a question like, you know, how's your week been? And they might go, yeah, it was fine, you know, and they don't divulge any more information than that. So they're kind of wearing a mask. And so a request might be something like, you know, when I ask you a question about something, would you mind giving me a little bit more information about your day, because I care about you, or something like that. So usually the request that the divine feminine and or masculine will make is something to do with their own insecurity. If they've been abandoned or ghosted or left in the past, they might say, look, it really freaks me out when you know, I don't know, you text me and you just don't come back for like 3 weeks and I don't know where you are, or, you know, I don't feel stable, kind of thing. And so one of the twin flames, by doing this request, is kind of putting themselves on the line, putting their heart on the line, you know, being vulnerable, allowing the other person in the connection to know what maybe their biggest vulnerability is, or their biggest downfall, as someone may even say. For many, it will be the separation that feels like the killer, you know. When you leave, I don't know when you're coming back. Can you please tell me when you're coming back? And your twin flame might say, well, I don't know, I've got work commitments and I don't really know what time, and I don't really know what day, and I, you know, or I have a karmic partner, or I have I've been working late or something, you know what I mean? So there might be all these excuses as to why your request can't be made. So usually the person making the request will go a little while and accept that their counterpart may not be able to meet their requirements, but they still feel, notice my throat chakra, yeah, because a lot of you are feeling abandonment issues. Okay, so then they might go, okay, next, they might get the courage up enough to, the next time they speak to their twin flame, they're going to explain. They say to themselves, I need to tell them why. That's why they're not doing it. Okay, they're not complying with my need. Let's say it's the abandonment need of not knowing when they're coming back. You could use it for multiple issues, but this explain section is number 2. And so they go, look, you know, and it might even be embarrassing, especially if they're on a video call or in person, you know, they might even blush or something. They might go, look, you know how I said, I really need to know when it is that we're going to talk. I'm not trying to be controlling in any way, but I just kind of have, you know, maybe I've got abandonment issues because my dad was never around when I was little, and I kind of hate it when people go away and I don't know when they're coming back, because it feels like it's a closure. So that might just be one way that, you know, someone might explain that particular circumstance. And of course, you can facet this R.E.A.L acronym around any of the requests that you make. So then that twin flame, usually the divine feminine in this case, will be vulnerable and then go on to explain, you know, it makes me feel this way if you behave in that way. So they're kind of saying, like, it's not your fault that I feel this way, and I get that it's not your fault, but it's a trigger for me. Okay, another example of a trigger might be that the twin flame may request, we'll go back to request and then explain, just so we can go over this again. But one twin flame might say, look, I'm not willing to do anything sexual with you until I know that this is really serious, or we have some kind of commitment, or there's a, you know, at least we're both looking into the future together. And so then the divine masculine, which is just for my example, you can take the energy how it resonates for you, but then the divine masculine might say, well, you know, they might do another call or another, you know, coffee shop meeting or something, and he might be like, I really can't, I have to make love to you, you know, I can't keep my hands off of you, this is like, how can I do this? And so then the divine feminine would explain that maybe it's for religious reasons that she doesn't want to become intimate, or maybe it's because in the past she's been used by other men and or women, depending on, you know, gender and fluidity, however you want to go there. So these are just a few examples of request and explain, usually done by the divine feminine. Okay. And so what it does is it creates vulnerability in whoever's doing the requesting and the explaining, but it also creates, on the other hand, it does create a little bit of a pedestal for the other counterpart, because they know what the downfall is of the other person. So if they're still in a third dimensional mindset or consciousness, or an ego in any way, they can use this as leverage to get what they want. So this is kind of where it gets a bit tricky, right? We've done the request and explain. Let's continue on the example of the sex example, okay? So the divine feminine has requested that there be no sexual intimacy until they really know where they're going. The divine masculine came up and tried to be sexual, and then the next part would be that she goes to the asking phase. He keeps doing it. He keeps doing this pattern of asking, you know, can we please just, I don't know, what's the next stage before making love? I don't know. Can we just do some foreplay, he might say, right? Can we just, I don't know, have a really long make-out session for 20 minutes and see where it takes us, right? So this might lead the divine feminine to having to ask again to, can you please stop doing this? Okay, with the example of the abandonment issue where we don't know if he's texting or calling or coming back again, it might be that she, when he finally comes back after 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks or a month, I don't know, however long, a year, can be longer for some, she says, look, I really need to ask you again to be more consistent. You know, can we talk once a week at a bare minimum? Okay. So remember, she's already requested this in the beginning, after the bubble love phase. This is what happens quite often, and she's then gone to explain herself. You know, I've got abandonment issues. I worry when people go away and I don't know when they're coming back. I like to feel stable in some kind of way. He's done it again. And so then she asks, one final time, because that's her boundary. I can't have a relationship or a friendship or a situationship or a marriage or whatever you're deeming it to be, or a twin flame connection with someone who will not respect my boundaries. And in this third step, this is really where she is pushing her boundary so that it's known, okay? So that it's respected. So she doesn't feel as though she's gonna freak out when he leaves. And for the person with the sexual thing that they want to wait until they're married, or until, they're definitely dating or something like that, that's, a boundary issue as well. Okay? So it seems kind of weird that you would need to have a boundary with your own twin flame, because they are you and you are them, right? But in the 3D reality, of course, they have their own mind and their own body. So they're going to have some behaviors that are not in alignment with your own. So the next point I want to get to is that whether the divine feminine, because that's what the example is for in this case, but whether the divine feminine knows this or not, these boundaries that she has that are constantly being triggered by her counterpart are so she can heal them internally. So that when the counterpart goes away, let's say the sex crazed divine masculine won't leave her alone, she decides that she's going to leave, as in, well, until he does this boundary thing with me, until he understands my boundary, I can't be in association with him. And so she might state this to her divine masculine. And in the case of the abandonment, this fourth and final stage, the leave, is maybe the divine feminine saying, look, if you can't be in my life permanently, or at least show up on a regular basis, then that's not what I want. So the R.E.A.L acronym here is very important, because it makes the divine feminine become triggered, number one. The other counterparts triggering whatever the fear is, or whatever the past underlying issue is that needs to come up for healing. And this is so that she or he, take gender and energy how it resonates, but this is so it can be recognized. Now, if we go over and flip to the other side, we can also go through this R.E.A.L acronym for the masculine. Usually the masculine doesn't like it when ... right? I hope no masculines are listening today, but usually the masculine doesn't like a request coming to him that he's not on board with. So for many divine masculines, they really love their freedom. So when the request comes in from the feminine, I really need you to text me or call me or meet up with me once a week, let's say, the divine masculine goes, well, hang on a minute. That might take away my freedom. And so even when the explanation comes from the other counterpart, from the feminine, and she explains why, he might even take a look at it. He might even think about it. He might even, meditate on it and go, well, that's a shame that she feels that way, like she's being abandoned, or that her dad did that to her. But he doesn't see it. He doesn't see that he's creating that same feeling if he does it to her. And so by the asking stage, some divine masculines who are awakening and who become more spiritual will kind of realize that they've done the wrong thing in not coming in and not doing what the divine feminines asked when they've agreed to it, because many of them will agree to it in the beginning. They realize that they have done a disloyalty or an injustice because they made a promise. And if they didn't make a promise, but they thought that they would try and at least adhere to it and they didn't, they can feel incredibly guilty, because in many times the divine feminine will go through a dark night of the soul because she's requested, she's explained why, and then she's asked numerous times. It may, the ask stage can go on for numerous times, and the divine masculine can even see this as being nagging. But then she gets to the point where she has to leave. And this is why many divine feminines say, you know what? He's not showing up. He's not coming in. Take gender how it resonates. But the divine masculine's not here. And I do have some boundaries. I don't have 869 boundaries, but I've got 3 boundaries. And they're either not being adhered to, or they're being crossed in some kind of way. And so that she can stand on her own 2 feet and be confident and self-loving, this is where she gets to the point where she says, I have to leave the journey, or I have to block them, or I have to ignore them, or I have to surrender this to God. Because it does come down to the point of respect. I find it extremely interesting how many divine feminines I've come across in all of my coaching, in all of the time I've been on YouTube, how many of them are willing to give away those boundaries for their counterpart. So what many of them will say is that, well, I love them unconditionally, and so even if they step over my boundaries or cross my boundaries or crazily do a cross stitch with my boundaries in some kind of weird way, they're willing to forgive it. Now, of course, being humble and having humility and being kind and being loving does mean that you can see it from a higher perspective, and that you can understand why your divine masculine may be doing these things, and it's to trigger you. But if the divine feminine doesn't get to the point in the 3D reality where she says enough is enough, then if they come into union, these patterns will continue. So it might be a request about a religious circumstance. If I'm going to be with you, I need you to understand my religion, and that this is what I do. Or I need you to understand that I have children, and I need to be able to honor those children as well as you, or something like that. It could be a multiple number of circumstances that the R.E.A.L acronym can come to. And in case you wanted just to be reminded of the R.E.A.L acronym, it is request, explain, ask, and leave. So then what happens after the leaving stage usually the asking stage will have a few asks, can you please not come at me with your sexual advances 10 million times, because until we've said what this is, I don't want to go any further. Let's say that's one. Or the other example was, can you please let me know when you're going to be in contact with me so that I feel stable and secure, and if I need to get in contact with you, I can. Now, just because I'll come to the leave in a moment and what happens after the leave stage, but what happens is that the divine feminine realizes that she is triggered by certain things, and not always triggered, but she starts understanding who she is. When the masculine goes against what she has as a boundary or what she believes in, this makes her understand herself more. She might even say, well, hey, it's a no-brainer now. Anyone who abandons me or ghosts me from here on in is not ever worth my time. If they come back in 3 months or two weeks, no thank you. I don't want to do that. So this works in all areas of her life. And it might be the same if she's been dating in the past and she's said to guys, look, I'm not willing to give away my body to you until I know this is going to be something more. It's a learning, it's a processing, it's an understanding of who she is. And this is part of giving yourself self-love. So many divine feminines get to the point where they want to leave, mostly because they've done the requesting, and maybe for a while it worked, but then they thought, it's kind of not fully working, so now I need to explain why I need this to happen in the relationship, even if it's only still just a friendship for now. And then she'll get to the asking phase, and she might ask 10 times. She might ask over a period of 10 days or 10 months or a year. And if the behavior of the counterpart continues, then she will get to a point where she will have to leave. And I've got dogs barking as a synchronicity there. And this is because synchronistically her vibration, her energy knows what she needs to be okay. In Australia, there's this big campaign for depression, and it's called Are You Okay? On a certain day of the year, you ring up your mates, or you call that friend and ask them that question, are you okay? When she gets to the leaving stage, she's usually at the point of not being okay. And this not being okay is actually enabling to her. She may have a breakdown at first, but as she comes through it, she'll realize that even if the counterpart was to come in, riding his white horse and bringing flowers and whispering sweet nothings or I love yous, or saying let's get married and let's buy a house in the hills together, or whatever it is, if they can't, in the previous stages to union, acknowledge the boundaries, then there really isn't a relationship to go on with. And so divine feminine here usually does one of two things. She might ask one more time and say, look, I really need you to understand that this is my boundary. If you don't text me, it doesn't have to be regimented, it doesn't have to be at 6 p.m. on a Friday night, but if you don't text me like on Fridays when you said you would, then I'm going to have to go. Because I shouldn't have to fight for this. Now, as she gets to the point where she understands how important she is and has this boundary, and maybe she leaves for a while and surrenders and says, you know what, c'est la vie, what will be, you know, that song, que sera, sera, whatever will be, right? She understands that loving herself is the most important thing she'll ever do, because she has to spend the rest of eternity with herself on a soul level. And this is actually what makes the divine masculine go, oh shit, I may lose her. Take gender, of course, how it resonates. But I might lose her for good. She's willing to walk away if I don't come good. If I don't, you know, she's not asking for miracles here. She's just asking for some stability. Let me be clear. I'm not, you know, in the request stage, in the R.E.A.L acronym here, you're not going to be requesting, you know, I need an $8 million house with a heated pool. Right? That's not the requests I mean. I'm talking about general requests like being loved, being cared for, feeling safe in a relationship, whether you're still in a friendship zone or whether you're in the marriage zone. If you don't feel safe with your counterpart, then someone will leave. And usually it's the divine feminine. In the first phases of this, she's a sweetie. She's requesting it. Excuse me, darling. Excuse me, sweetheart. Excuse me, friend. Would you mind if you contacted me on Mondays? I know it's your day off, but you know, after you've had your day, and could you just text me to, you know, so I can just hear from you at, I don't know, after dinner or something, just so I know that everything's cool with you. It'd make me feel really, really safe knowing that you're safe. Would you be able to do that? Sure, he says. And it goes undone for a couple of weeks. And then sometimes he comes in more often. And then she explains again, look, I love it when you come in more often than we said. But I really need you to definitely come in when you said, because I know that at that time you're definitely coming in, and if I've got any things that I want to talk to you about maybe about my week, or maybe about any problems I'm going through, or maybe, you know, maybe you might need my support, that'd be great. So she's done the explaining here, and then he comes in and out and he's okay and it's working for a minute, and then he goes again. And so she asks him again. She's kind of feeling embarrassed by this point, but she's trying to be kind, she's trying to be respectful, she's trying to, you know, put her boundaries out there in a nice way. You know, if you've got kids, you know what I mean. You kind of say, hey Johnny, Mom doesn't like it when you do this. You need to pull your head in, please. You ask nicely, but on the third go, you're starting to get you'll start to feel resentment. And this is what happens to the divine feminine, is that she starts to feel resentment, and she'll close off her heart chakra. And once she's done, for many divine feminines, they're done. So for any masculines listening today, this is a really important understanding. And it works both ways, because the divine masculine also might have requests and use the R.E.A.L acronym. And for some of them, there'll be deal breakers for them. For some of them, you know, the divine feminine asking them to, you know, communicate at a certain time takes away their freedom. So this is all about coming to an understanding that, wow, my divine feminine needs this, and I need that. I need freedom as well. How do we both get what we want in a loving, nurturing, safe environment where both parties are feeling like they're heard? You know, what about that poor old divine masculine who wants to have sex, and he can't do that until divine feminine says yes? Maybe intimacy is his love language, and that's a real trigger for him. So maybe he leaves the connection because he needs to feel loved. So you see how the dynamic can work for twins in separation, or in semi-union, as I like to call it. You know, when you're still back and forth texting or calling or videoing or going to coffee shops or going skydiving, whatever you're doing together. I don't know how many twin flames have been skydiving together, but that would be funny. So this R.E.A.L acronym can work really well, but it can also be the deal breaker, or as we sometimes say in Australia, the straw that breaks the camel's back, which means, you know, if you pile a whole heap of straw onto the camel's back and you can see that it's straining, it just only needs one more piece of straw, even though it seems tiny, but that one little problem can be the thing that bursts it all. So if your counterpart is asking you in the 3D or even in the 5D, if you're intuitive enough to know what your counterpart needs, understand that they have a boundary for a reason, and as long as it's a reasonable boundary, it can make or break the actual 3D relationship that you have together. So if someone had a fear of heights and you took them on a date to jump out of an aeroplane, they may not forgive you for that. You know, I don't know if you've ever heard of those stories where people get pushed into a, you know, they say they can't swim. Oh, I can't swim. I'm afraid of the water. And someone will push them in and go, well, now you know how to swim. We are allowed to have boundaries. And the things that trigger us, which are usually our divine counterparts will mirror to us as a reflection, without even knowing they're doing it sometimes. You know, there's the divine masculine, like, I'm free to do what I want any old time. And the divine feminine's like, I'm clingy. I need you. Come back. You know, she's like in Titanic, where she's like blowing the whistle and come back, you know, for the boat to come and rescue her. So this is okay, because both twin flames recognize, you know, divine masculine might be the one that recognizes that he loves his freedom. Divine feminine might realize that she really needs someone to love and nurture her and give her a cuddle. This is part of understanding who you are in your 3D reality, whilst also remembering that you want to maintain your ascension and your high vibration. This is why I've gone through it in a nice way. You know, she's requested nicely, excuse me, divine masculine, could you please do this? And then she's explained it. I have, you know, issues about abandonment, or about sex, or about religion, or about a culture, or about our age gap, or about that you're married, or I'm married, or we're both polygamous, or you're a polygamist and I want to be monogamous, right? Depending on whatever it is. And then she'll say, honey, darling, please, can I ask you again to respect this boundary, because it means so much to me, and I've gone over it and over it in my own mind, and I know why it means a lot to me, and I know it makes me feel safe, and I need it. And she knows that that's intrinsically who she is. And if it keeps being broken, or the boundary, it's the straw that breaks the camel's back, she will leave. Or he will leave. Gender and energy can be flipped here. So when your counterpart says to you, something's a deal breaker, they may not even say it in that way. They may just be sweet and kind and say, look, I'm religious. I don't, I can't speak to anyone on Sundays because I'm praying all day, let's say. You wouldn't then go and ring them on a Sunday, right? You would respect their boundaries. Just like if you have friends and someone rings you at 2 a.m. and you're like, dude, don't ring me at 2 a.m. because that's just rude. You know what I mean? The same thing has to happen in the twin flame journey in the 3D reality. And just because they're your twin flame, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't walk away when they're crossing your boundaries. If you've requested, explained, and asked multiple times, then you are well within your rights to leave or block. Or I'm not a big fan of blocking, because then if they want to apologize, there's no way of doing that. So blocking is a bit silly. But you could say, in a text or in a call, unless you're willing to do this thing which you agreed to do in the beginning, please let's not speak until then. Or unless you're willing to have a conversation about this, please let's not let's just take a break for a minute and regroup. Okay, so this is some of the stuff that people don't often know what to do about. Many divine feminines have requested, explained, asked, and then put their hands in the air and gone, you know what, it's not worth it anymore. This person is just pushing all of my buttons. I'm madly in love with them, and yet they won't text me. I'm madly in love with them, but they don't understand that I've got a boundary, my religious boundary, or my cultural boundary, or my sexual boundary, or my morality boundary, or whatever the boundary is. So if you are, the last part of this message is, if you are in regular communication with your twin flame, as in you going back and forward with text messages or calls or video calls, or you're meeting up with them in person, a discussion about boundaries on both sides is like a miracle worker, because if they know how to play in your paddock, right, and you know how to play in their paddock, then we can join the two paddocks together and you can create a wonderful farm of interesting and fun ways to, keep doing this relationship, keep having this journey, keep reinventing yourselves together. Okay. But if, it might even be something as simple as, I don't know, one twin flame is into Star Trek and the other person is so not interested in Star Trek, which is, usually this doesn't happen for twin flames because they like mostly the same things, but let's just say, I don't know, the divine feminine's ex-boyfriend was into Star Trek, and now all her twin flame seems to do is talk about Star Trek. That could be a trigger for her. She's like, dude, I don't always want to talk about Star Trek. Right? I went to all of those weird, what do they call them? When people dress up like conventions. I had to dress up as as a Klingon 18 times in my previous marriage. I really can't go there again. Right? So it can be something silly that is a trigger. It doesn't have to be a massive, psychological issue. But, many twin flames have been through a lot in their life. Some have got PTSD, some have got anxiety, some have got abandonment issues, some have got sexual issues, especially if they were molested or raped or some kind of thing. You need to be able to tell your twin flame that you've got boundaries and that you've got them for a reason. I'm not just being anal. Excuse my language, but in Australia we say you're being anal if you won't do something. So that's supposed to be funny. But you're being anal if you won't follow my boundary, because the reason I've got that boundary is so that I don't get hurt again. The reason I've got that boundary is so that I can follow my religious or cultural practices. The reason I've got that boundary is because I've got a moral code that I stand for and I've thought about for months and years, and I've been inside of myself and taken a look at who I am. The reason we usually have boundaries, especially if you're on the spiritual twin flame journey and you've awoken to a certain point, you have these boundaries because you know who you are, right? I've been with guys who, as an example, don't call me back. I've been with women who only want to use me for sex. I've been with people who disrespect my religion. I've been with people who are culturally, not accepting of what food I eat or what race I am or what I do on the weekends, whatever it might be. So this has been a long concept video, but if you want to write it down, it's the R.E.A.L acronym: request, explain, ask, and then leave. When you are in communication, in 3D communication with your twin flame, you want to let them know what your boundaries are, but in a fair way. So this is why we have request, explain, and ask. You've requested it. If they're not doing it or they won't agree to it, you explain why, so they've got the opportunity to understand you more. Then you might ask, and you might say, well, I'll allow them to not do it for 5 more times, but on the 6th time, and I'll even tell them I'm leaving. Okay, so this is part of the surrender. A lot of other twin flame coaches will say detachment. But the reason why many people leave the twin flame journey is because they get to a point of the leaving stage, because they have requested, they have explained, they have asked, and then they've left. And on the other side, for the divine masculine, they've also been triggered by it, because the abandonment of the feminine may trigger the want for freedom in the masculine. The inability to have sex right now because of trauma or PTSD or something like that may trigger the divine masculine's absolute hunger and need for that as a love language. These are just examples. Let's do the Star Trek one as the last one, but the divine feminine's absolute annoyance with Star Trek and the divine masculine's love of it is there so that he goes, well, this isn't fair, I want her to like what I want. So it's a learning thing for him. And then she goes, well, maybe I'm going to have to like it a little bit, but I'm not going to any of those conventions. You know what I mean? So it's about compromise. Because how can you love someone without understanding the other person? Most twin flames come into that bubble love phase. They're feeling the bubbles, they're feeling the love, they're feeling all of that wonderful kundalini rising. It's magical, it's a fairy tale feeling. And then no one ever bothers to discuss what their needs are. And when you don't discuss your needs and your boundaries, this is the straw that breaks the camel's back. and twin flames go into separation. And in fact, many twin flames who were together before they cleared all this stuff ended up breaking up for some reason, because a boundary was crossed. You know, some divine feminines, as an example, they might write to me and say, look, I was with my twin flame for 2.5 years and we just couldn't be together. And this is because of the R.E.A.L acronym. There was no requesting, explaining, asking, and then leaving. You've got to have a point of where you're going to leave. I was going to say, or at least threaten to leave, but threaten's the wrong word. You know what I mean? But you've got to at least say, look, if I can't have this, then I have to leave, because it's who I am. So your twin flame will trigger you on purpose, and you will trigger them. And this is all about understanding and coming into the knowing that you both are doing this for growth. You trigger them so they can grow. They trigger you so you can grow. And you may learn to hate one another for a while. And that is all part of the journey. But unless you're willing to leave at a certain point and say, look, I'm not doing that, then you aren't loving yourself. You know, you have to always put yourself first and foremost, because you're going to be with yourself for the rest of your life and beyond, because you are your soul. But I just wanted to bring in some of the 3D perspective, because a lot of times people are talking about, you know, the ethereal or the 5D, and oh, it's so wonderful when I feel my twin flame with me and I'm meditating and praying and all of that. But this is, the real deal. When you come into actual communication with them in the 3D, there has to be boundaries, and you have to do it in a nice way and tell them why and ask them to please, respect those boundaries, because you've got them for a reason. And if you don't have boundaries and you don't know what your boundaries are, that's why I've made my Ascension package. So you can actually find out who you are, and it's not all about boundaries. It'll cover the mind, the body, and the soul. Okay. So if you don't know where you stand and what you need from another, not in a codependent way, but in a real way where you go, well, that's a deal breaker for me, because then you need to sit down for a while and take some notes. I need joy in my life, right? Just as you need food and you need shelter and you need happiness, also feeling safe is really important. So if you can allow your twin flame to understand what your needs are, and they can allow you, even if you sat down together and swapped pieces of paper or text messages, if you can't be in the same location, that's going to be really helpful in the future, so that you know what their boundaries are and they know what your boundaries are. Okay. So I think I'll give this a title of, boundaries and the R.E.A.L acronym. Something like that. So this will be in the Twin Flame concepts playlist. If you want to come back to it again, feel free to do that. And the reason I'm doing an audio series at the moment is so that you can just listen and take notes. It's really helpful to take notes, because, as you grow and ascend, you're going to have more and more epiphanies. And as your vibration gets higher and higher, you'll have a higher level of understanding through the higher intellect and through the soul. And even if you come crashing back down and have a dark night of the soul, you can come back to these videos again and you can go, oh yeah, that's right. I do need to have boundaries. I do need to take care of me. And as I take care of me, because my twin flame is me, I also am taking care of them. All right? So it's not like a traditional third dimensional relationship, where this R.E.A.L acronym could also work you know, I promise this is the last thing I want to say, but this acronym here is so important for the twin flames, because not only will it allow you to see who you are, but it'll also allow your twin flame to understand who you are. So you just might have 5 things that are deal breakers for you. You know, I can't have a friendship or a situationship or a marriage or a connection with someone who doesn't meet these 5 standards. And then you can go one step further and say, because I don't want to feel abandoned ever again, or because I have a cultural need that means that's who I am, or because my religion dictates that I want to live my life in this way. Right? You might only have 2. It depends on who you are and what stage you are. But you're also going to need to understand that your twin flame also has needs and boundaries too. And so you can kind of skip through a lot of the BS by understanding what each other needs. You know, this is my paddock. In my paddock, we do these things. And they go, well, in my paddock, we do these things. And then we can, you know, that little fence that's in the way, that border that's in the way, we can break down that fence and we can join the paddocks together and have a beautiful big farm with a lot of happy animals. You know what I mean? Happy campers, and no camels in there with straws that are going to break the camel's back. So defining yourself first and foremost is why the Ascension Package was born on my channel. Okay? And this has helped many, many twin flames who are now in union, some of them getting married, some of them having babies. It really works. But for those of you who just want a little bit of guidance for right now, this is what I want you to understand. The R.E.A.L acronym is very real, and is why many of you have left the twin flame journey, or are taking a pause from the twin flame journey, or don't know whether you can handle your twin flame ever again, and vice versa. Maybe they don't know if they can come back because of this. You can put yourself in these scenarios and go, shit, oh dear, Donkey. Donkey, you can talk to Donkey about it and say, Donkey, he requested that I don't call him 18 times on a Friday night when he's at his swimming lesson with his mum. And he explained that, you know, his mum doesn't like to be disturbed while they're doing their swimming. And I, you know, continually did that thing that he didn't want me to do. So you can even put yourself in the other scenario of, oh shit, you know, oh shit, Donkey, I've crossed your boundary. No wonder you don't want to talk to me anymore. All right. So I think this is long enough. It's going to take, you know, a gazillion years to upload this to YouTube, but it's so worth it, I think. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you want to get in touch with me for any of my packages, they're going to change your life. You know, no promises there, but for most people, they are life-changing. Any of you that have done my packages might want to write in the comments section about, you know, how life-changing it's been so far. And anyway, it doesn't matter if you don't want to, because some of you want to keep your you want to be anonymous, you know what I mean? You don't want your name plastered all over YouTube, and I get that too. But I wish you all a beautiful day, night, afternoon, evening, or morning, wherever you are in the world. And remember, this will stay in the Twin Flame Concept playlist as boundaries and the R.E.A.L acronym, okay? So I'll talk to you real soon. Have a great day wherever you are in the world. And kisses from Donkey, and tacos from Harry and Charlotte, and some organic apples from Little Red Riding Hood. And Chef says he's going to add pancakes to the mix. So there you go. Have a great day, everyone. See you later. Bye.